I am Tamara, and today we are going to be making a set of 4 placemats. Now, these placemats are extra special because you will be learning how to do a mitered corner on your placemats. It's a super simple step. I will walk you through all of it so that you will be able to do it. So if you are a beginner sewer, do not let that deter you. You can do this. One more thing to mention, I have a matching blog post for this project that will be linked in the description down below. And in that blog post, you will find all of the measurements as well as the amount of fabric that you need to purchase to be able to make a set of 4. So let's jump on in and get sewing. You will need fabric for the front, fabric for the back, and some thin batting. The amount of fabric that I've given you will allow you to make 4 placemats, but you will need to cut the fabric correctly to get 4 placemats out of the fabric. So as you can see here, I've already cut a strip of fabric and it is at 13 inches high. This is my fabric for the front of my placemat. Trim away the selvage edge, and then I'm going to measure from that edge in all the way, and I am going to cut it at 18 inches. So in the end, you will end up with 2 pieces of fabric that are cut at 13 inches by 18 inches. And of course, you will be able to do this 2 times. So you will end up with 4 pieces of fabric that will be the fronts of your placemats. You will do the same method when you are cutting the back fabric. So you will cut a strip of fabric at 16.5 inches high. Then you will trim away that selvage edge. Make sure that you are getting really close to your selvage because you are going to need 21.5 inches in length for this piece of fabric. So as you can see here, I'm turning it around and then I'm going to measure all the way to the edge and just trim the little bit of excess that is left away. So your backing fabric should measure 16.5 inches high by 21.5 inches wide. Doing this method, you'll end up with 2, and you will do this 2 times, so you will end up with 4 pieces in the end. So now that I've got my 4 back pieces and my 4 front pieces cut, I'm also going to cut my batting. And my batting is going to be cut at the exact same measurements as my front fabric. So the batting will also be cut at 13 inches by 18 inches. So just grab 1 back piece of fabric, 1 front piece of fabric, and 1 layer of batting. And we are going to put together one of our placemats. So grab 1 piece of batting and grab 1 front piece of fabric and lay the front piece of fabric on top of your batting. Now we are going to want to quilt these 2 layers together. There are a few different ways that you can do this. What I'm going to do is pin these 2 layers together using some quilting pins. If you don't have special quilting pins, you can use safety pins. You can even use regular pins if you would like. Or if you really hate all of this pinning, you can buy a product called 505 spray. I will link in the description down below to 505 spray if you are interested. If you are using 505 spray, you'll just spray your layer of batting, you'll spray the back of your fabric, and then you will lay your fabric on top of the batting so both glue sides will face together, and then you will just hand press it neatly together. And then you will be able to sew through the 2 layers without any pinning. And now that I have all of my pins in my fabric, I want to draw a few lines for quilting. So I'm just going to grab my friction pen, as it is a great product. I will also have it linked in the description down below. It allows you to draw directly on your fabric, and then later you'll just press those marks away. But you can use any water-soluble marking pen as well to make these lines. Just draw a line from corner to corner, creating an X on your placemat. Then take this to your sewing machine and sew along both marked lines. Now, of course, as you're sewing, you may come across one of your basting pins. If you do, pause, take the basting pin out, and then continue sewing. Never sew over your pins. All right, before we actually quilt our placemat, I do want to show you, if you are making this project for the very first time, you've never quilted in your life, definitely follow the instructions that I'm giving you to do the X on your placemat. However, if you want to get creative or you want to try to find a few different ways to do it, I don't know if you can see this on camera, but this particular one, I've done lines all the way down like that. And then this one, I did the same lines, just lengthwise. So I started in the center on both of those placemats. You start with the center line and then you work your way out. And then this one, I actually did the X, but then I also added a plus. So it creates a bit of a star in there. So if you want to experiment as you're making all 4 placemats, you can definitely try out a few of these options.
And now that both of these layers have been quilted together, it's time to remove any of the basting pins that you used and remove any of the marking lines that you created. So for myself, I used a friction pen to draw my X on my fabric. So I'm just going to use the heat of my iron to heat press away those lines. That's what I love about the friction pen, is it can just disappear with your iron. However, if you used a water-soluble marking pen, you can either take a wet cloth and wipe those lines away, or you can wait until you're done the project and then throw it through your washing machine. For this next step, you will need to know where the center is along all 4 edges. So the way that I do this is I just fold my project in half, and then you can finger press a crease into those edges. You'll do that as well using the back piece of your fabric. For myself, I'm actually just going to use my iron to press in these 4 creases. Then you will take that center piece of fabric that you just quilted and lay it on the wrong side of your backing fabric. And now to center it, you're just going to line up those creases that you just created, and it will become neatly centered. You can, of course, always grab a little measuring gauge and just measure all 4 sides to make sure that it's centered as well. And then just pin it in place. And now for the fun part. We need to trim away all 4 corners, but you do need to leave a 1/4 inch sticking past the point. So depending on the ruler that you have, you may have lines that will allow you to do this. So this particular ruler, it has my 45-degree angle. And then as you can see, it has a little section above it that is a 1/4 inch. So I'm going to line up my lines to the edge. That way I've got the 1/4 inch sticking past my point, and then I'm just going to trim away that corner. Now, if you have a ruler that does not have that 45-degree angle with the 1/4 inch sticking past, all you'll do is find the 45-degree angle on the ruler that you do have, and then measure a 1/4 inch past that point, push your ruler out to that point, and then you can trim away your edge. You just have to make sure that you have a 1/4 inch past your point. That's the most important part. And once you've trimmed away all 4 corners, now you're going to prep all 4 edges. Now the way that you'll do this is you'll do this with your iron, and you will just fold your edge towards your center fabric, line it up along the center fabric, and then give it a press. Now that you've folded all edges in, you've created a nice crease, and you're going to take a marking pen and just draw inside that crease on all of your points, because you will need to line up those marks in the next step. So this next step is how we are actually going to create our perfectly mitered corners. So turn your fabric over. Now what you can do is actually take that center piece of fabric and unpin it from your backing fabric. If you're really new to this, I do recommend doing that, and then you can just center it back in later. But for myself, I've put my pins in far enough to hold all of these layers together that the front piece of fabric that's attached to the batting is not getting in my way. Now what I'm going to do is line up those 2 marked edges. As you can see, there's my pin. It's far enough out of the way. And I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam from that marked edge out towards the fold. So I'm going to start there with a little back stitch and go all the way to the fold and end with a back stitch. And you'll do that for all 4 points. So here I'm removing my pins and you can see that I've got that seam, but I still have the little flaps unsewn. Then just trim away a little bit of the point, making sure, of course, not to snip into the seam that you just sewed. By trimming a little bit of this excess fabric away, you're just removing a little bit more of the bulk so that your mitered corner will look nicer when you've turned it right side out. Do this for all 4 points. All right, and now you can turn your project over and you can start tucking those corners over that center fabric. Just do this with your fingers at first, and then if you want, you can grab a pointer tool. For myself, I like to use a chopstick, and you can just gently push those points out with your chopstick. Make sure, of course, that you're not pushing too hard because then, of course, you can pop the seam out completely, and that would be very, very frustrating. All right, you guys, we are almost there. Now it is time to just tuck the earlier pressed folds that we had created in and clip it in place. And then you're going to take this to your sewing machine and you're going to do a top stitch around that entire edge. Of course, you're going to start and stop with a back stitch. But something that I do like to do when I am doing this step is I just lengthen my stitch a little bit. So normally a stitch is at around 2.5 millimeters. And I like to move it up to a 3 millimeter stitch. It's just a tiny bit longer and it gives it a nice look.
Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you don't want to lose me on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed sewing 4 beautifully mitered cornered placemats, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Happy sewing! Bye for now!